Welcome to the tutorial on business ethics. Today the chapter is the corporate culture, impact and implications. In this chapter, we are going to learn about the development, influence and management of corporate culture, as well as the role of business leaders in creating, enhancing and preserving cultures that support ethical behavior. What is corporate culture? Before knowing the definition of corporate culture, we can see the definition of culture. Culture is a shared pattern of beliefs, expectations and meanings that influences and guides the thinking and behaviors of the members of a particular group. And in the same way, corporate culture can be defined by exploring the following issues such as tempo of work. Tempo means speed of work, the organization's approach to humor, methods of problem solving, and the competitive environment, incentives, individual autonomy, hierarchical structure. So these are the issues. If we explore these issues, we can get idea about the corporate culture of a company or a firm. A firm's culture can be its sustainable value, offering it direction and stability during the challenging times, or it can prevent a firm from responding to challenges in creative and timely ways. Impacts of corporate culture on ethical decision making. In chapter 1 in this course, we considered the law's limitations in ensuring ethical compliance. In situations where law provides an incomplete answer for ethical decision making, the business culture or the corporate culture is likely to be the determining factor in the decision. And in chapter 2, we have learned that we can use moral imagination to assessment, and in that case, if the employees of a corporation is empowered with the ethical environment, in that case we can expect that they will act in a ethically responsible ways. That means moral imagination depends on the surrounding environment of a company. In that case, if there is a ethical environment or ethical culture in that organization, the employees will get the empowerment to act in ethically responsible ways. In chapter 3, we have learned that ethical virtue has an influence on ethical decision making, and ethical virtue depends on the characteristics, traits and habits. The cultivation of habits, including the cultivation of ethical virtue, is greatly shaped by the culture in which one lives. That means culture has an impact on ethical virtue or virtue ethics. In the workplace, individuals quickly learn behaviors that are appropriate and expected, and through which they get rewarded and promoted. That means when there is a culture of reward or promotion on the basis of behavior, the employees learn or shape their behaviors in that organization. Intentionally or not, business institutions provide an environment in which habits are formed and virtues or vices are created. That means whether there will be a good virtue or bad virtue, that depends on the environment of that organization. The responsibility for creating and sustaining ethical corporate cultures depends on the corporate leaders. The attitudes, values, expectations, mindset, and habits of a corporate leader determine the culture of the organization. That means the culture of the organization depends on a behavior of a business leader. And whenever there is a ethical leader, there will be a possibility of ethical decision making. Difference between a compliance based culture and a values based culture. In a compliance based culture, we try to focus on the obedience to laws and regulations for ethical behavior. That means, in a compliance based culture, we try to comply with the laws and regulations. On the other hand, in a value based culture, we focus on the conformity to a statement of values and principles. That means, whenever we do ethical behavior considering the values and principles, that situation is called value based culture. Some companies follow the compliance based culture, and this compliance based culture is one kind of traditional approach, and in some companies they follow the values based culture, and this values based culture is more flexible and far sighted for taking ethical decision. Here is a table showing the difference between a compliance based culture and a values based culture. This column is showing the compliance based culture, and this column is showing the values based culture, which is also known as progressive culture. That is considered as a best practices. We can see in compliance based culture, we focus on audit. On the other hand, in the values based culture, we focus on business. In compliance based culture, we focus on transaction. On the other hand, in a values based culture, we focus on process. In a compliance based culture, we focus on financial account, and in a values based culture, we focus on customer. In traditional approach, our main objective is on compliance, and in a progressive or values based approach, our main objective is on risk identification, process improvement. In a compliance based culture, we focus on the policies and procedures, and in a values based culture, we focus on risk management. In a compliance based culture, there is a multi-layer audit coverage. On the other hand, in a compliance based culture, there is a continual risk assessment coverage. In compliance based culture, there is a adherence to policy, and in a values based culture, we believe in change or progress. In a compliance based culture, there is a budgeted cost center. On the other hand, in a values based culture, there is a accountability for performance improvement. In a values based culture, the auditors have a scope to pursue their careers, and in a progressive or value based culture, there is an opportunity for the managerial positions in various aspects. Summarily, we can say in a compliance based culture, we focus on policies, transactions and compliance. Values based culture focus on goals, strategies and risk management processes. The role of corporate leadership in establishing the culture. If the goal of a corporate culture is to cultivate values, expectations, beliefs, and patterns of behavior, that responsibility primarily depends on the corporate leadership, because a corporate leader can steward the effort to cultivate the values, expectations, beliefs, and the patterns of behavior, which will create a good corporate culture. Leaders are charged with this duty to create a corporate culture, because most of the cases the stakeholders are guided by the tone at the top. That means most of the cases the stakeholders follows the tone of the leaders. Companies can have the most extensive processes and procedures, but if they have the wrong people in positions of leadership, in that case, there will be a less transparency and integrity. And in that case, there will be a bad culture. That's why the leaders have a great role in establishing the culture. An ethical leader will have a ethical tone, and that ethical tone or ethical responsibility will cultivate values, expectations, beliefs, and patterns of behavior for a good corporate culture. Ethical leaders say no to conduct that would be inconsistent. That means the ethical leaders never compromise with the inconsistent behavior because they focus on ethical values. A corporate leader can be a role model by setting a good example, by keeping promises and commitments, by maintaining their own standards, and by supporting others in doing so. That means a leader has a responsibility to be a role model for others by setting a good example, by keeping promise and commitments, by maintaining their own standards, and by supporting others in doing so. Ethical business leaders not only talk about ethics and act ethically, but they also allocate corporate resources to support and to promote ethical behavior. To ensure a good ethical leader, sometimes the corporation assign ethics officer. Ethics officer is an individual or person who is charged with managerial oversight of ethical compliance and enforcement within the organization. That's why we can say the role of a corporate leader has an impact in establishing the corporate culture in an ethical way. Difference between effective leaders and ethical leaders. Effective leaders is a person who successfully and efficiently guide, direct, and escort others to achieve the goals of that organization. But we can't say that every effective leader is an ethical leader because there is a difference between effective leaders and ethical leaders. And the main difference is on means or ways or method used by the leaders. The effective leaders may adopt threats, intimidation, harassment, or coercion to achieve the goals of the organization. On the other hand, an ethical leaders never adopt such negative issues. Rather, they use more amenable interpersonal means or ways. Ethical leaders try to use ethical behavior, persuasion, and they try to use the impact of their institutional role. That's why we can say there is a difference between effective leaders and ethical leaders, and the difference is solely on methods. Effective leaders sometimes may adopt bad method, but the ethical leaders use the ethical methods by doing amenable or favorable interpersonal behavior. They try to persuade the stakeholders. Ethical leadership is determined solely by the methods used in leading. Creating a corporate culture in which employees are empowered and expected to make ethically responsible decisions is a necessary part of being an ethical business leader. That means to ensure a responsible decision, there should be an ethical business leader. Role of mission statements and quotes in creating an ethical corporate culture. If a company need to have a code of conduct or statement of values, in that case, the company should determine the mission statement, because whenever we face dilemmas or challenges, the mission statement will provide a clear direction to avoid the dilemmas. So, what is code of conduct? A code of conduct is the set of behavioral guidelines and expectations that govern all members of a business firm. And what is mission statement? Mission statement is a formal summary statement that describes the goals, values, and institutional aim of an organization. A mission statement should be inspiring so that it contains the fundamental principles to guide all decisions. That means if a company have a mission statement, the company will have the clear goals, values, and institutional aim by which a company can create a ethical corporate culture. That's why any company who is interested to maintain an ethical corporate culture, the company should determine the code of conduct as well as the mission statement. How various reporting mechanisms such as ethics hotlines and ombudsperson can help integrate ethics within a firm. I mean, if you want to integrate ethical culture in a corporation, you can use some mechanism like ethics hotline or ombudsperson. As well as we can use an effective communication. We can create a whistleblowing environment. We can use ombudsperson. We can use ethics hotlines. Communication patterns describes the organization far better than the organizational charts. And we can use whistleblowing to expose and to end unethical activities. Whistleblowing is a situation where an employee discloses unethical or illegal activities to someone who is in a position to take action to prevent or punish the wrongdoings. We can appoint ombudsperson. A ombudsperson is a person who ensures justice by ensuring the ethical culture in internal and external environment. And as well as we can also use ethics hotline to get the unethical information about any person who is in higher position. This mechanism of ombudsperson or ethics hotline allow employees to report wrongdoing and to create mechanisms for follow-up and enforcement. That's why we can say the mechanism of hotlines or ombudsperson or a whistleblowing or effective communication can help in integrating ethical culture in a organization or a firm. Role of assessing, monitoring and auditing the culture and ethics program. It is necessary to measure, assess and monitor the culture because if we want to encourage the stakeholders of a company, we need to do it to pay attention to the ethical culture. By monitoring or by assessing or by doing auditing the culture and ethics, we can uncover or we can find out the vulnerabilities and challenges. And by uncovering the silent vulnerabilities and challenges, we can do the risk assessment and ultimately we can prevent those risks. That's why we need to assess or monitor or audit the culture and ethics program to find out the challenges or vulnerabilities, and that process can be used to find out a measure for risk assessment and prevention of that vulnerabilities and challenges. In uncovering the vulnerabilities, the monitoring process can be used for evaluation to evaluate the level of appropriate resource allocation. We can assess the following issues like whether the program is keeping pace with organizational growth, whether all of the program's positive results are being accurately measured and reported, whether the firm's compensation structure is adequately rewarding ethical behavior, whether the tone at the top is being disseminated effectively. So these are the issues which should be evaluated or monitored by an external auditor. External auditor can collect benchmarking data relating to the firm's code of conduct, training program, other educational or integration components, as well as the evaluation of those programs if they are offered. So these are the issues which should be assessed, monitored, or audited to ensure a good ethical culture. Role of governmental regulation to enforce corporate culture. If the internal mechanism is not adequate to maintain the corporate culture, in that case we can expect governmental regulation. The government can introduce regulation to ensure ethical practices in the corporate culture. In that case, the government should establish a separate judicial service to deal with the ethical issues in the corporation. Thank you.